Imagínate escuchar tu canción favorita como si fuera la primera vez. Te presentamos el totalmente nuevo y reimaginado Nissan Kicks con sonido Bose Personal Plus y bocinas en la parte superior de los asientos para crear una experiencia 360. Jamás has escuchado algo así. Reimagina tu música y tu forma de manejar. Descubre el totalmente nuevo y reimaginado Nissan Kicks en nissanusa.com. Función disponible. Bose es una marca registrada de The Bose Corporation.
Lights, camera, debate, ignite, passion strong under the spotlight. Tune in for the clash, tune in for the spark, the critic and the cynic light up the dark.
Hey, what's up, and welcome back to The Critic and the Cynic. My name is Dave, and I will be the critic with you this evening, and with me, as always, is...
Hilary.
Who is...
The Cynic.
That's right. We are on to Season 2. So, Season 1, we talked about Christmas movies, be it Hallmark, be it Netflix Christmas films specifically, but now we're going on to the second season. We got a lot shorter of a list of movies to get through this time, and instead of talking about 5 or 6 movies every single episode, it's going to be a lot more laid back. We're just talking about 2 movies per episode, which means that the podcast episode is going to be shorter and everything. But the theme of this season is what?
I don't know, Tearjerkers.
Yes, Tearjerkers. So the idea that I had here was to look at movies that in the past have either made one of us cried or, you know, had gotten close. Maybe we're going to give it another shot to see if it works this time around. The rules basically are that one of us had to have seen one of these movies, and while the other person hasn't. I don't think there's anything on the list that neither of us have seen.
I guess not.
More of these I've seen than you. I think I have 6 of these on here. You have 4.
I only see 2. Well, 3, I guess, from me.
Yeah. So what we have here, we're going to be talking about 2 movies in this episode. We're not entirely sure which ones yet because we have a random wheel selector to choose these movies for us. But it's going to be very similar to the first season. The first half of the podcast episode, we're going to look at the movie poster. We're going to read about it. We're going to decipher, try to figure out if the movie is going to be any good, if we think it'll make us cry. Now, the main challenge that I'm going to try to have you, Hilary, make is to try not to judge it by its cover, try not to judge it by who's in it, because you don't like certain people, okay? Because that doesn't necessarily make a movie good or bad.
Right, the people absolutely can make the movie good or bad. I will stand on that hill.
Okay, well, I am saying that that's not necessarily the case here. So what we're going to do here is we're going to spin it, and we're going to find out the first movie that we're going to be talking about in episode 1.
You know, this is the same spinner we use at work.
Is it really?
Yes.
There's a couple out there. Okay. We've probably both seen this one.
Yeah, but...
Alright, so the first one that popped up is The Lovely Bones. This is the one that I was probably the most unsure of. I've seen it a few times. I like it as a movie. I don't think it ever really... It gets sad. It has a lot of deep things going on in the movie, but does it make you cry? Will it make you cry?
I have seen it.
It deals with death.
Yeah, but I don't remember crying at it.
Alright, so let's go ahead and see if we can pull up the...
And obviously, like, this one is very popular. It was a book first. They turned it into a movie. I never read the book. I've heard more about it than I actually have experience with it, because people just were talking about this nonstop. Still talk about this all the time.
Right. So The Lovely Bones came out on January 15th, 2010. And it was directed by Peter Jackson.
Okay.
One of his not lesser known, but definitely less popular, because he does the Lord of the Rings and everything. All right, the tagline reads, "The story of a life and everything that came after." And then the premise reads, after being brutally murdered, 14-year-old Susie Salmon watches from heaven over her grief-stricken family and her killer. As she observes their daily lives, she must balance her thirst for revenge with her desire for her family to heal. This stars Saoirse Ronan in the first thing that I ever saw her in. I think probably most people probably saw her first here as well.
Oh, no. Well, maybe this was first, but I know her best from Atonement.
Okay, yeah. This, at least, I think this put her on the map. It's her voice that does it in the movie, like, for sure.
Actually, come to think of it, Atonement came first because 2010, I was already done with college, and I definitely watched Atonement while in college.
Okay, I guess. But it's not her movie, and it
might not be her movie, but it's where I know her.
And I would say with Atonement, a lot of different little girls could have played the same character.
Maybe.
But only she probably feels the most fit for her role as Susie Salmon in The Lovely Bones. Of course, I'm over here reviewing it without having rewatched it and everything, but I like the movie. I always planned to read the book that it was based off of, but I never got around to it. But this is the one I'm most unsure of in terms of being emotional.
Now, have you heard what's his name? This guy here.
Stanley Tucci.
Yeah. Have you heard that Ryan Gosling was actually going to play that role?
In the movie? He was much younger at that point.
He got fired.
Why?
I don't remember, but I've definitely heard that multiple times over the years. They replaced him.
Ryan Gosling got fired from The Lovely Bones?
I think they didn't like what he did with the character.
What could he possibly do to the character to make him hate him more?
I have heard multiple times over the years that maybe it's a rumor.
Saoirse Ronan landed the role of Susie based off of an audition tape that she sent in. They were so impressed by the tape that no meetings or further auditions were even necessary before they offered her the lead role in the movie. That's how good she is in the movie.
Oh, wait, no, I guess I was wrong. He was cast as the father.
Oh, the dad. Okay. That makes a lot more sense than Wahlberg. Okay. I could believe Ryan Gosling as the dad of Saoirse Ronan. I don't so much because you got Mark Wahlberg and Rachel Weisz, who both... you can imagine the kid that they would have if you just look at them. They're both dark-haired, like...
So, according to this, they never started filming with Gosling, but the cast had done some preps by the time he got fired.
But does it say why? Just he does things?
Because he decided to gain 60 pounds for the role, and the director was like, F no.
I don't think Mark Wahlberg gained anything for it.
That's because that was his decision to gain weight for the role, and he was not told to do that, and they didn't like that he did that, and so they fired him and replaced him.
After he gained weight?
Yes.
That's terrible. You got fat. Get out.
That seems like a lawsuit waiting to happen, but all right.
No kidding. All right, so that's the first movie on the list is The Lovely Bones, which brings us to the next option, The Peanut Butter Falcon. Do you know anything about Peanut Butter Falcon?
Yeah, you watched it while I was in the same room as you, and I was reading or doing something else, so I wasn't paying attention, but I've definitely seen parts of it.
Oh, okay. So I've told you at least a little bit about it when I first saw it, as well as months after. But The Peanut Butter Falcon was a movie that came out in the year...
It was recent.
It was 2019, so 5 years ago. Well, 6 by the time this podcast comes out. And it stars Shia LaBeouf, which was an interesting choice in 2019, specifically because this was around the time where he was just crazy.
He's still crazy?
He's not really crazy. He's very much into the art scene, and he does weird things because he likes people's responses. He's actually pretty smart in what he does. He's just bold in doing things that people wouldn't be expecting.
Well, I don't really fault artists and artistic people for being a little bit cuckoo, personally. I think you have to be. I also think you have to be, like, super, super smart, So, yeah, 2019, August 9th, 2019 specifically. If I'm not mistaken, when I did my end-of-year awards for my movie reviews, I placed Peanut Butter Falcon as number 1 that year. Yes, I know. You went on and on about it for quite some time.
it's one of those weird movies where people have not really seen it or heard about it. It just kind of went under the radar for a lot of people. But I don't see any taglines for this, but we'll read the premise here. A down on his luck crab fisherman, that would be Shia LaBeouf, embarks on a journey to get a young man with Down syndrome to a professional wrestling school in rural North Carolina and away from the retirement home where he's lived for the past 2.5 years. This one I remember getting on the edge of emotional. Now, this was during a time when I just didn't get emotional at all for anything, so it really made a difference when I ran into any movie that got me just a little bit like on the edge of emotional. Like, that made a difference. Nowadays I get more emotional with things,
So this could be entertaining for me.
and that's gonna make me stop being emotional all over again. But
I cry at everything, so I cry at commercials.
the other people that are in the movie, you have Dakota Johnson and Thomas Hayden Church, John Hawkes, Bruce Dern, John Bernthal, I'm not sure how you say his name. And the kid with Down syndrome is Zach Gottsigan. Yeah, there's not much to say about it. It is an adventure tale, and it's just about friendship, kinship. It's just feel good. It's feel good, but you like the characters. And it was really nice to see Shia LaBeouf in something like this after years of being like, is he okay? Is he losing his mind entirely? So when you see these movies now and then where he just kind of shows up and he's like a normal human being and he's actually pretty good, you're like, oh, okay. A lot of that stuff is just an act and just, for artistic purposes. If you can separate him from that, I don't know. Like, imagine him doing all these art pieces, right? And then he gets, like, people off of his back, like nobody wants to be around weirdo Shia LaBeouf, And so he ends up being a weirdo, keeps people off his back, and then he can enjoy his life as is. But yeah, Shia LaBeouf, the Peanut Butter Falcon. Do you think it'll make you?
I have no idea.
Well, you're the one that says you can cry at commercials and trailers.
I cry at something.
At the thought of things.
At the thought. So be prepared. Like, if any of these movies make me cry and we're discussing them afterwards, probably gonna choke up again. But it's fine. It's fine. Okay, so like I said, we're just talking about 2 movies at a time here. So that's the 2 movies, The Lovely Bones and The Peanut Butter Falcon. All right. We'll catch you after the break where we talk about these 2 movies. So stay tuned.
Approximately 10 hours later.
All right, so we are back, and we had just got done finishing the first film on the list, which, if you don't recall, is The Lovely Bones. So I can't even remember the last time I watched this movie. I've seen it 2-3 times before this, but I couldn't remember what it was specifically about it that I liked. I just knew that I liked it, but we were trying to find out if it was really a tearjerker or not, because I don't remember it being a tearjerker the last time I saw it. But what do you think?
I would say that it is. I mean, throughout the movie, I teared up.
Yeah.
There's not, like, usually with tearjerkers, the movie is pretty, like average, like not sad, not happy, just kind of like normal. And then at the end, they kind of like gut punch you, right? And so then you sob for the last half hour. But this wasn't like that. This was kind of like...
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I would say if we had to categorize what makes it a tearjerker, I would say the sick/death category. I think that there's a lot of that in our list, but there's also tears of happiness in the list too, but not much, I would say.
Well, yeah.
The next one is more of a tears happiness, in my opinion, than sadness, if I can recall correctly. But anyways, yeah, this one had me misty-eyed a few times here and there scattered throughout the film. I would say the main reason why I liked it in the first place has to do with just it's a beautiful film.
Well, yeah, the visuals are impeccable. And not just the beauty of it. Sometimes it is the horror of it. It's like that bathtub scene.
Yeah.
That is a creepy ass scene, like straight out of a horror movie.
Yeah, and it's from beginning to end, I would say the director had a very clear vision behind what he wanted to do, and that was dreamlike state. So there's almost always like a echo in everything everybody says, even before the main event happens, because as you said,
it was memories.
You said it was memories. So from beginning to end, it was a very dreamlike thing. So like the horror aspect, that's like the nightmare part of it.
Right.
So...
And it's creepy. I mean, you get the shivers.
Right. There's moments in here. Stanley Tucci specifically, I said to you, I don't think that this is the first thing that I saw Stanley Tucci in, because he's in so much, but I do believe that it was the moment that I watched him in something where I will always know this is Stanley Tucci. This is the moment in his career that stood out to me.
Yeah, he was perfect.
Yeah, like I could see a bunch of people turning this role down because they're like, I don't want to be like, I looked at it as that kind of person, but he did such a great job with it. I know that there are differences between the movie and the book.
I have never read the book.
And I have not read the book either, but I understand the book wanted to focus a lot more on Susie's character change, her family, and stuff like that. And the movie wanted to balance that out, which it had a lot of that in there, but it wanted to balance it out with a lot of karma for the bad guy. They wanted there to be some tension trying to find this guy, while the book did things differently.
Yeah, I do not know. But speaking of tension, I don't know what you were thinking of, but the scene where the detective is interviewing the neighbors and they come to, the killer's house, and it's very much like a cat and mouse type of situation. Like, they're looking through the dollhouse, and it's like the police officer will change which window he's looking through, but Stanley Tucci is just like right there too. So it's just, yeah, you might be one step ahead of me, but I'm meeting you every single way. And like, that was a very tense scene.
There was a very specific way that the director had about him that I really appreciated. When he had Susie Salmon in his little like box under the earth, or I don't know what you call it.
Yeah, just like a cellar, basically.
Yeah, basically a cellar in the middle of nowhere. And he had her down there, and then the director kept things really neat and tight, and he was making sure that the camera was close and looking upward at him while he looked down at it to show how imposing he was towards a kid or something. And I guess it's the best thing that you could do, because it also was
a little claustrophobic, and they're in the little tiny space.
Yeah. The movie made some safe decisions because the book would get a little bit more raw in terms of what was happening, but the movie tried to keep things more dreamy, like I said.
Yeah, but I'll make the argument that sometimes when you're watching a movie or even reading a book, sometimes you don't want to see or describe a traumatic event, because whatever your reader or viewer can imagine is probably a lot worse than whatever you can write or film.
Right.
So, like, the fact that they didn't, and that's why I'll go back to the bathtub and the bathroom scene. I mean, it was grotesque and scary at the same time, and so you got the picture, but whatever we were imagining happened was probably worse than whatever they could have shown us.
Right. And I appreciated the way that they went about it. I remember the bathtub scene, but I couldn't remember the specifics about it. I remember there's him in the bathtub, there's some blood on the sink. That's all I could really remember.
There's a lot of blood.
But there's a lot of blood, there's a lot of dirt, and there's a lot of mud. Yeah, the bath he's in specifically is like black, viscous water because of just how much is coming off of him.
Well, and he's got the washcloth over his face. You can't see his features. And it's very, like, creepy and monster-esque.
Yeah, and it sets the tone for sure for the rest of the movie. But it does have this thing where it goes back and forth between sad scenes, people experiencing grief their own ways with her passing. On one side, they're trying to get, justice for it. That would be Mark Wahlberg's character. And then the mom, Rachel Weisz,
she's trying to
get past it.
She's trying to get past it. She's also just trying to survive. I mean, she's hanging on by a thread.
Yeah. And so we talked a lot about the visuals, which were really good. And we also said before we watched the movie, when we were trying to predict if it would be any good or whatever, make it be an actual tearjerker, was that the girl playing Susie Salmon, Saoirse Ronan, she sent in an audition tape, and the director said right then and there that she got the job.
Well, she's perfect.
Yeah, and she's done a lot of things here and there throughout her career. I don't think anything's been as iconic or as memorable as Susie Salmon.
That's again where I'm gonna just disagree a little bit, because Atonement, her character, actually that whole movie Atonement just really stuck with me.
That's fine. Like, it's not her movie.
No, it's not, but she was iconic in that movie for me as well. But I'm gonna say, like, even when she wasn't in the scene, when she was just narrating things, I mean, like,
that's why she was hired, is her voice.
Yeah, her delivery is perfect. Because,
but it was like also her eyes, apparently.
Well, yeah, I mean, she's got great eyes.
Yeah. That was another thing that I mentioned about the visuals when we were watching it, was if you look really close, her eyes look really dilated during that scene, and then his eyes are like really, his pupils are really small.
Which actually make a lot of sense, because I'm going to use an example of a cat. Like a cat as a predator, when they are onto their prey or trying to catch a toy or whatever, I mean, their pupils are very dilated. Because it's that adrenaline, it's that focus.
Yeah, I get it. I think
he was a predator in that
Yep.
scene.
I think visually what they were going for was bigger pupil makes for scarier, scared, I'm gonna cry kind of look, while his was more predatory. Like he was targeting in almost, you know?
Well, it's true, but like to target in, pupils usually dilate.
Yeah, but then again, I do believe he was wearing contacts, I think, to make him look creepier. I think he was wearing contacts. He's also wearing a weird wig, I think. I don't think that was his actual hair. But, like...
Well, and he had something going on with his teeth. I don't know.
He had something with his jaw, yeah.
Like, I don't know if it was false or if it was just acting or whatever. But, like, everything about him was just...
he did a good job.
That's the point.
Yeah, they did a good job. And you were mentioning a lot with Ryan Gosling.
He was supposed to be the dad,
and
I made an artistic choice to gain weight to play this dad, and apparently they didn't want that. Apparently they wanted like a little sexy time.
Yeah, well, exactly. And apparently about weight, because Susie Salmon's like, I'm gonna grow up to take pictures of nature, take pictures of wild elephants, but for now, I'm just gonna have to make do with taking pictures of my fat neighbor, basically.
Yeah, well, yeah, and then in the first scene where she's talking about, I mean, at that point she's like, I've been murdered, blah 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 blah. They have this, overweight guy behind her kind of staring at her, and so like you were like, oh man, maybe that's the guy, because he's kind of like stalking her and like watching her, and that's creepy. And then she's just like, yeah, it wasn't him. He's weird, but it wasn't.
He's weird, but he's actually a really nice guy. His daughter's also gonna die. So yeah, they had a weird thing with weight with this movie. I mean, even you can make the claim that Stanley Tucci's character was a little bit like it had a dad bod,
Just a little bit. I actually think he was just wearing a lot of clothing.
He had a lot of bulky stuff on, yeah.
But the mom was like a stick.
But if you had Stanley Tucci in that role and you had Ryan Gosling overweight and whatever with a dad bod with the same color hair and eyes as the murderer, you might have some problems.
I mean, you might. I mean, I don't know, but from a casting standpoint, the parents didn't look-wise make sense with their children.
They're all blonde
kids, and blue,
all kids, blonde hair, blue eyes, and then the parents brown and brown.
Which, I mean, genetically is absolutely possible, but all three of your kids, highly unlikely. Yeah,
highly unlikely. If there was only one kid, I'd be like, oh, okay, because we do have one kid that's blonde hair, blue eyes, while we are brown and blue, but brown.
Yeah.
So I guess it makes more sense with us than them, but still.
But yeah, I mean, like, I'm not saying it's impossible. It's just highly unlikely.
Yeah. So let's do it this way. Let's give it 2 scores. Let's give it a score in general as a movie and a score on the tier scale.
I mean, this movie is wonderfully made. You have to put it in like probably 95.
Yeah, it is. I think when I first saw it, I probably put it up there, 95, 98, somewhere up there. I don't even remember what it was.
I mean, I don't even think you could make an argument of anything they could have done better. So really, you could go 100.
Yeah.
It's just, at that point, it's a preference thing.
Yeah, the one complaint that I had, you fixed it because you're like, oh, this is memories.
Yeah.
Because I was like, don't go into that world. Don't go into the dreamlike world until she's dead. But apparently she's dead the whole time, so...
She's dead the whole time. She's narrating it the whole time. She specifically says, I remember... Like, the first line, I think, is...
I was...
Small. So, she's just remembering her life after death.
Yep. So, and in that case, my score has to go up at that point. I mean, it's a nearly flawless film. The only thing that I will say this, I'm not a big fan of Mark Wahlberg.
No, I do not like that.
Here's what I said to you when we were watching it. I said, I think Mark Wahlberg is probably the worst part of the movie, but it's also, ironically, probably my favorite thing that he's in.
Yeah, I could see that.
So, because, he did have a scene or two that probably got me a little bit emotional.
Well, sure. Because he's a father and he lost his child.
And he played it okay. Yeah. But he's Marky Mark. He's going to have his Mark Wahlberg, hey, donkey, signs where he does the same thing over and over. But when he's a lot more subdued, or when he's just obsessive about trying to figure out who did this to his daughter, those are good scenes. It's just the normal scenes in between where he's just talking normal. I was like, okay, there's Mark Wahlberg. So I think that it's not perfect because of Mark Wahlberg, but other than that, it's nearly flawless.
Yeah. Then you got Susan Sarandon in there.
Yeah.
I remember. And I love her.
She's good. She had a good character role, especially towards the end. They brought her in, and she needed to be the center, the rock, I should say, the balance for the kids' sake, because the parents are going insane for their own reasons, but especially towards the end, when whatever happened towards the end, because parents weren't
in a place.
They weren't in a place where they could really do much more story-wise, but Susan Sarandon could. Yeah. So that's good. I do like her character. Every time that I watch it, I feel like in the back of my head, I'm like, is her character really all that important? Are they just throwing her in because it's Susan Sarandon? But she does play a pretty vital role at the end of the day. So...
The other score would be how much?
What's the scale on the teary-eyed?
Scale from what? 0 to 100, 1 to 10?
I'd probably say 0 to 10.
0 to 10. I'm gonna go with a 5. I mean, yeah, right in the middle, 5.
Right in the middle, because, 5?
Yes, it got me multiple times. I never sobbed. There was never a moment where I was uncontrollably sobbing. Yeah, I have to go in the middle.
I would have to say 6.
Okay.
Because I think in general I enjoy the movie more than you.
Probably.
I like watching it. To me, is more than a one-time watch type of movie. Some people might think it's a one-time watch movie because people don't like movies like this that touch base on this type of subject matter.
Well, especially since, there's no justice, really. I mean, karma, sure, but no justice.
It's about karma more so than it is about justice, yeah. But it's not that type of movie.
I know, yeah. But still, it's unsatisfying from you want a better outcome.
Yeah. And there was also an alternate ending where karma didn't even hit as hard. I read about it. But I guess I'll tell you about that later. But it's basically what ultimately happens just without the karma part. So, yeah, I'd say 6 out of 10 just because it got me multiple times too. But, that doesn't usually happen for me.
Yeah, and it just never gut punched you.
No, to me, I often have problems with being emotional when watching anything. So for me, getting gut punched in general is a rarity. It's hard. It's it builds. There's a tier system. It's just it's building, and then it can really hit you. But it takes a lot longer of a time period for me than what these movies give me. So I almost get there, and then it goes on to the next scene, and I'm like, okay.
That's why I say a traditional tearjerker is more of, it builds the whole time. It builds these really great characters, and then usually something just god-awful happens.
God-awful.
And that's the gut punch.
Yeah. So, The Lovely Bones. Nearly flawless film, almost 100% score, but the teariness scale It's between a 5 and a 6 for us. So, will there be more? Will there be less? Well, only time will tell. And the next film that we are talking about is The Peanut Butter Falcon. So, yeah, this one came out in 2019. The first time that I saw it was during 2019, and it was one of my highest rated films of the year, if not the highest, because I found it to be a surprise, just like a welcome surprise. And back then, I never shed a tear for like anything, and I still didn't shed a tear for it when I watched it, but I remember specifically feeling emotional while watching it, which was really rare. And that was like the start of a few things throughout the years from then on out that had, warmed me up to the idea of being a little bit more emotional while watching movies. And for me, when it comes down to looking at both of these movies, The Lovely Bones and The Peanut Butter Falcon, in my personal opinion, I think that they're both beautiful for different reasons.
I struggled with this one.
The Lovely Bones was beautiful visually and even auditorily. I consider The Peanut Butter Falcon to be beautiful intrinsically and emotionally. It is about two friends. It's about acceptance. It's about a lot of things, honestly. But you have this Down syndrome kid who nobody takes seriously. A lot of people throw out derogatory names. He's being held basically prisoner in a nursing home because his own family rejected him and he had nowhere else to go. And you got Shia LaBeouf's character who shows up, who just welcomes him in and treats him like a normal human being. And the fact that he has Down syndrome makes no difference to Shia LaBeouf's character. I love that.
Well, I mean, that's all fine and dandy, but I've seen movies like this before. I've seen them done better.
I don't know, because 99% of the movie is really just about friendship, a little bit of coming of age, and an adventure. I think atmospherically, it reminds me a lot of...
You're thinking of Stand By Me.
Stand By Me, right? I couldn't think of it. I think that when we were watching, because, the whole movie takes place in the South, that there's just something about it that doesn't feel modern. It felt to me like it could have came out in 1990, like... It's just, they are stuck in a bubble of time down there, so so much happens in it that just feels so weird to see in today's day and age.
Well, down to the fact that they were still watching videotapes.
They were watching VHS, walking around, just holding on to rifles, going into gas stations with rifles strapped. I'm like, we live up, northern area of the country. That people do not just walk around gas stations with rifles strapped to their backs.
Not strapped to their backs, in the back of their truck.
Oh, yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. Usually they leave them in the trucks.
They don't carry them around.
But I think that everybody in the movie did a really good job. I think that it all felt natural. I think that the relationships that everybody had was relatable, but it was also about living the dream, so to speak, having a dream, and not just having a dream and trying to succeed the dream, but having somebody by your side who believes in you and supports you 100% of the time. And it's not a romance, which is usually what you might get with that.
Well, there is some romance.
There's romance in there, but the main thing here is just a friendship between these two guys. Now, that might be why you don't relate so much with it.
No, because I love Stand By Me.
Yeah, well, most people like Stand By Me.
Well, I'm just saying, some of the movies that I've put on this list deal with unlikely friendships and the same idea. There's actually two that we'll be watching eventually, in my opinion, have done it better.
Okay. I just happen to know that some of those older films by John Hughes that focus a lot more on the female main characters, 16 Candles, Pretty in Pink, I know that when we try to watch them, I couldn't care less about them, and you're like, oh god, yes, and I'm like, I just don't see it.
Okay, but to me, it has nothing to do with the gender of the characters. I understand, and actually I think it's more problematic for males to relate to female-driven stories. However, it is not true in the reverse, because one of the greatest complaints that I heard growing up is that there's no good books for boys, because all of the good books are appeal to girls because they're with girl characters, and there's not like strong books that appeal to a lot of boys growing up. And that's fine. I've never quite understood why they couldn't relate to a female character, since I can just fine relating to male characters.
I don't know, I can relate to Katniss.
Well, but here's the thing. I think most guys could say that, like, their friendships and everything are with boys exclusively. I don't know.
Sure, I guess a lot of the guys hang out with their own.
Yeah.
I grew up the opposite, so I don't know.
Okay, well then you really shouldn't have a problem dealing with female characters.
And maybe I shouldn't, but I mean, I even think I go way back to being watched by a babysitter who had a daughter, and I played with the Barbies and the dolls and things. I didn't have a sister growing up, but I did have babysitters who had daughters, and I've gone to, play dates, I've gone to birthday parties with other girls who had these things. But there's something, maybe it's the growing up part, like the teenage, just the puberty, portion of the girls where I'm just like, I don't know.
Maybe. And like coming of age stories for a young girl are very different than coming of age stories for usually young boys, because you're dealing with a whole different thing. And I don't know if guys can ultimately relate, whereas it's easier to relate to a coming of age story of males when you're a female, just because it's all the same stuff that females go through, except actually a little bit less.
Yeah.
So I guess, I don't know. And I was a total tomboy growing up, and I had a lot of male cousins. All of my friends were boys. I remember being little and having a birthday party, and there was girls and boys at the birthday party, and the girls were giving me like My Little Ponies and Barbies, and I'm like, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe it's just a completely different experience.
Yeah. Well, what did you think about Shia LaBeouf, and what do you think about the main girl from 50 Shades of Grey? Is all I can think of.
Okay, like, it was completely replaceable. I don't know. I think like Shia LaBeouf's character could have been replaceable, but I've always liked him. Even when he was crazy, I always liked him. So, I mean, it's always nice to see him. I do appreciate that they didn't have somebody pretending to have Down syndrome. They actually cast a person who actually was a Down syndrome person. I think that always offers authenticity to a story.
Yeah, and they had Zach. His name was Zach in the movie, and the actor's actual name was Zach too. So it's not, he wasn't playing himself. It's a different spelling of Zach, but it was still Zach. I think Shia LaBeouf was not as replaceable as you think he was. He and Zach had a lot of great chemistry together.
Okay, they had great chemistry, but I'm thinking back to other stories that I had growing up with male characters, and you had Brad Renfro, you had Jonathan Taylor Thomas, also two actors who had great chemistry with each other, and Brad Renfro, he really could probably have played this role. He's too old now, but I could see a young version of him being
I'm not sure who that is.
Well, you will be, because he's in one of the movies coming up, so no problem.
I really liked Shia in this role, especially after a lot of the weird controversy and the strangeness surrounding him. I thought that he brought it, even though he was a southern character in this, he still kind of grounded himself as a grounded character, in my opinion. Dakota Johnson, this is probably my favorite thing that she's in. Especially,
you can't tell me that she was so great in it that she couldn't have been replaced by pretty much anybody.
She could have been replaced by anybody, because this was pretty much the height of her career, and she was probably in the most things right around here. She's kind of fizzled out since then, but she was in a lot of comedies, she was in a lot of dramas, and this was just another drama that she was in. I think as far as dramas go, this is probably my favorite thing she's in. Again, I think that she's better as a comedic actress, and she's better in comedies. I think she's more natural in that. But, as far as dramas go, I thought this was okay. I had forgotten completely that John Barenthal was in it, and he was basically playing the same type of role he plays in The Bear, in which he is just a memory. He's a long-lost dead brother. Same thing in Bear.
Well, if you look at it that way, I mean, like, you've got these three characters who kind of form a family. because their own families are either dead or have left or whatever.
There's a lot of mimicking going on in the story.
Right. And like, it's always a nice story. It's always a sweet story, but I mean, I just don't see much.
They kind of formed their own island of misfit toys, if it were.
Exactly.
Because, everybody was treating the Down syndrome kid, Zach, pretty horribly, but they were also treating Shia LaBeouf's character, Tyler, pretty horribly as well. He's kind of an outcast, and Dakota Johnson.
Yeah, she was kind of being treated like she wasn't very important.
That is true, but hers is the most or least effective because she was implementing the prison sentence for Zach, technically, in the beginning. She's just doing her job, but, like, at the same time, she wasn't totally against basically imprisoning him. She is in the mindset that he can't do anything.
Well, she's in the mindset that he needs protection. And I don't think that's a wrong mindset. But I also think that you can't just protect somebody forever.
No, you gotta let them go at some point.
A little bit. You have to let them learn about the world a little bit. I mean, don't just abandon them, but I mean, give them the space to grow.
Yeah. So, all right. In general, we got the 2 ratings that we gotta talk about. The first rating is what we rate it in general, as a movie in general.
I mean, there's nothing really wrong with it. Like maybe 80 for me.
80. Okay, and then I will tell you that my original score, I don't remember what it is. I'd have to go back, but I do know that I scored it on Tracked.tv 10 out of 10. And I know that Rotten Tomatoes scored it 95 out of 100, while the audience scored 96 out of 100.
Okay, but again, I feel like a lot of people haven't seen these stories, but I have. So it's not really anything new to me.
Well, this isn't just a story in general. There's a lot of things going on at the same time.
Yep, and I've seen it.
We'll see about that. So in general, I'm going to tune down my score a little bit. I'm going to go down to 90. And the main reason why is my second viewing was good. It just wasn't as great as it was the first time around. I think the blind viewing for the Peanut Butter Falcon is probably the best way you can go about it. It is an adventure tale, and as such, I know how it's going to turn out at the end of the day. So a lot of the most effective emotional parts of the movie just weren't as effective on my second viewing. Now, a part of that could be because we had to pause it like 30 times.
That's just life.
Yeah, well, so I made a rule that we can only really watch these movies if we have the time where children will not come in and interrupt where we have to pause. Because if you're trying to watch movies, specifically when it comes down to possibly emotional, teary-eyed movies, you can't pause them. You gotta let it build, and you gotta let it affect you naturally. You can't pause.
Right. It does mess up the whole flow of what they're going for.
Right. So that could be contributing to my slight lack of entertainment this time around. I still really like the movie. I just don't think I would consider it the best of 2019 at this point. But at one point I did. What about your 0 to 10 score on emotional?
Okay, I want to say 0 because I didn't even tear up at all, but I will give it a 1 because I see where they were going for the emotion. It just didn't get me.
Right, so there's a couple things going on in this one. Like in the last review we did for The Lovely Bones, I put it in the category of sick/death, you know? And this one is a little bit different. Yes, Shia LaBeouf's brother died, right? And so there's a death in there. There's an aspect of death, but it's more about redemption, and it's more about friendship. It's more about feel-good tears.
Well, yes, and normally feel-good tears get me just as much as the sad ones, but I mean, it didn't get me here.
I will give it a 4, just because when we're comparing the two that we saw today, The Lovely Bones and this, The Lovely Bones got me more, but also the Peanut Butter Falcon wasn't something that was trying to get you very often.
True.
It wanted to hit you a couple different spots. I think the first one that it was trying to get you at was the heart-to-heart that the two guys were having about good guys and bad guys.
Yeah.
Zach was asking, are you a good guy or bad guy? Shia LaBeouf's character's like, I don't know, what do you think, man? He's like, I think you're a good guy. In which Shia LaBeouf's character says, thanks, buddy, but then he just thinks about the time where he killed his brother, and so he has a lot of guilt on. And he doesn't know if he deserves, like, a friend like Zach, or a brother like Zach, for instance. And there's these moments where it's kind of where he's thinking about his brother, and Zach will put his arm around him. I think that these are emotional scenes. And towards the end as well, there's like a scene right at the tail end that really wants to grip you a little bit because of everything that came before it and what that means going forward. So I think that it has really good scenes for emotional, teary-eyed stuff. I got misty-eyed once. It has the same problem I have with everything else, is the build-up is just, it's too quick. It's too quick, and then it goes on to the next thing. So I'll just go with 4. I think that the first time that I watched it, the emotional part of it was more strong for me, but yeah. So, The Lovely Bones and The Peanut Butter Falcon. There's your 2 movies. Join us next week where we'll be talking about another couple of films as well. We'll try to figure out how much we can make us cry. And until then, peace out.
Bye-bye.